Let me start with the simplest possible explanation. Before cloud computing existed, if you wanted to run a web application, you had to buy physical servers. You would spend tens of thousands of dollars on hardware, provision it in a data center, wire it up, and maintain it. And if your app suddenly got popular and needed 10 times the capacity, you were stuck. There was no fast fix. Cloud computing changes that model completely. Instead of buying infrastructure, you rent it. You go to a provider like Microsoft Azure, request a server, a database, or a storage bucket, and it is running within minutes. You pay only for the time you use it. When you are done, you stop paying. No hardware to maintain, no data center to manage, no upfront capital expense. That is the core idea behind everything we are going to cover in this series. So why Azure specifically? There are three major cloud providers: Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud Platform, and Microsoft Azure. Azure is not always the biggest, but it has specific strengths that matter a lot for enterprise and developer teams. First, it has more global regions than any other provider, over 60, which matters for compliance. If you are in finance, healthcare, or government, specific regulations require your data to stay in certain countries. Azure has that coverage. Second, if your organization is already using Microsoft products, Windows Server, Active Directory, SQL Server, Office 365, Azure integrates with all of them out of the box. Third, Azure supports hybrid scenarios better than anyone. If you have existing on-premises systems that you cannot move to the cloud immediately, Azure lets you connect them securely and extend them gradually. That is a real-world need many companies have. Compute is the first pillar. It means processing power, the ability to run code. Azure offers several compute services, and choosing the right one is one of the most important decisions you will make. Virtual machines are the most flexible. You get a full server with a chosen OS. You can install anything. The trade-off is you manage everything: patching, scaling, security. Use VMS when you need specific OS level control or are migrating legacy applications. App service is the sweet spot for most web developers. You deploy your code, Azure runs it. No servers to configure, built-in scaling, SSL handled for you. Use this for websites and APIs. Azure Functions take it further. You write a single function that runs when triggered, and you only pay when it actually executes. Perfect for background jobs, webhooks, and event processing. Container instances and ACS are for containerized workloads. ACS is the full Kubernetes cluster experience when you need serious container orchestration at scale. The second pillar is storage, and Azure breaks this into very specific services depending on what type of data you are storing. Blob storage is object storage. Think of it like a hard drive in the cloud. You store files, images, videos, backups, log files, anything unstructured. It is extremely cheap and infinitely scalable. Most applications use blob storage for at least something. Azure SQL Database is a fully managed relational database, essentially SQL Server in the cloud. You write SQL queries, Azure handles backups, scaling, patching, and high availability. Cosmos DB is Azure's globally distributed NoSQL database. You can replicate your data across multiple regions simultaneously, and reads feel local everywhere. It supports multiple APIs including MongoDB, Cassandra, and its own document model. Azure Files is interesting for enterprises. It gives you a shared network drive backed by the cloud, accessible via SMB protocol. Great for migrating on-premises file shares. The third pillar is networking. This is the invisible layer that connects everything together, and beginners often overlook it until they get stuck. A virtual network, or VNet, is your own private network inside Azure. When you create virtual machines or services, they live inside a VNet and can communicate with each other privately. Nothing from outside the internet can reach them unless you explicitly allow it. A load balancer distributes incoming traffic across multiple servers so no single server gets overwhelmed and your app stays available even if one server crashes. We have a full dedicated topic on this later in the series. VPN Gateway creates an encrypted tunnel between your Azure VNet and your office or data center. Your on-premises systems can talk to your Azure services as if they were on the same private network. ExpressRoute is the enterprise version of that, a dedicated physical fiber connection from your data center to Azure, not over the public internet at all. Much faster, much more reliable, much more expensive. Let me explain how Azure is physically organized because this directly affects how you design your applications. A region is a geographic area like East US, West Europe, or Southeast Asia. Each region contains multiple data centers, usually 3 or more. When you deploy a resource, you choose a region. Your resources live there physically. Within a region, availability zones are isolated physical data centers with independent power, cooling, and networking. If you deploy your application across 3 availability zones in the same region, it can survive a complete data center failure without your users noticing anything. Why does region choice matter? 2 reasons. First, latency. Deploy your app in a region close to your users and responses feel faster. Second, data residency laws. Many countries, especially in Europe, require that certain data cannot leave their borders. Azure's broad regional coverage means you can comply with those regulations while still being on one cloud platform. This is a question every developer team faces eventually. Should we move to the cloud, stay on premises, or do both? On premises means you own the hardware. You have full control. You know exactly where your data is. But you pay for it upfront regardless of whether you use it. Scaling takes months. Order new servers, rack them, configure them. And you need a team to maintain it all. Azure flips this. No upfront cost, you pay monthly for what you consume. Need 10 times the capacity next week. Done in minutes. Going global? Deploy in another region today. Cloud is the clear winner for startups, apps with variable or unpredictable traffic, and anything that needs to be global. On-premises still makes sense when you have a constant, perfectly predictable workload where you can fully utilize dedicated hardware, or when compliance requirements mean your data absolutely cannot leave your own building. Hybrid is the real-world middle ground most enterprises end up in: sensitive workloads on-prem, everything else on Azure. Here is one of the most practical things I can teach you in this series. Most developers think about what they want to build. But in Azure, the more important question is, what level of management responsibility do I want? At the top, virtual machines give you everything, but you manage the OS, security patches, runtime updates, scaling rules. Maximum control, maximum responsibility. App service takes away the OS entirely. You push code, Azure runs it. You just set how many instances you want. About 70% of web APIs and web apps belong here. Azure Functions take it even further. You write one function, one handler. Azure decides when and how many to run based on demand. You pay literally nothing when there is no traffic. Containers sit somewhere in between. Container instances are simple: run a container right now. ACS is for when you need complex orchestration, multiple containers talking to each other, custom scaling strategies. The right choice is always the least amount of complexity that meets your requirements. Let me talk about money, because this is where a lot of developers get surprised when they first use Azure. The default model is pay per use. A virtual machine running for an hour costs a set amount. Stop the VM and the billing stops. Simple. But it is easy to forget resources running in the background, and the bill adds up. If you know you will need a VM or database for a year or more, reserved instances let you commit upfront in exchange for 60 to 70% savings. This is how enterprises dramatically reduce cloud spend. Azure Cost Management is a free built-in tool that shows exactly what you are spending, broken down by service, resource group, and time period. You can forecast future spend based on current trends. The most important thing you can do when you first create an Azure account is set a budget alert. Go to Cost Management, create a budget, and tell Azure to email you when spending hits a threshold. This one step prevents almost every surprise bill story you have heard. Let me send you off with a clear action plan, because the biggest mistake beginners make is watching tutorials without actually touching Azure. Step 1. Create a free account at portal.azure.com. New accounts get $200 of credit for 30 days plus 12 months of free services. You need a credit card to verify identity, but you will not be charged unless you explicitly upgrade. Step 2. The moment your account is created, go to Cost Management and set a budget alert. Set it low, $20 or $30. This is your safety net. You will thank yourself later. Step 3. Create a resource group. Think of a resource group as a folder that holds all your Azure resources for a specific project. Every VM, database, and storage account lives in one. When your project is done, delete the resource group and everything inside it disappears. Clean and simple. In the next video, we will walk through the Azure portal in detail, every section, every menu, and how to actually navigate it without getting lost. See you there.